Hey, this is John, founder of RocketForms here. Let's dive into our third video of building your first rocket form. Today we're going to talk about steps. Now, if you missed the first two videos, you can learn about settings in the settings video. And then in the second video, we talked about design. So today we're going to talk about steps and we're going to dive into how to set up a step and edit and change a step and all that great stuff. So, just a reminder, and I covered this in the first video, when you go to create your rocket form, I always suggest diving into a Word document or a Google Sheet and kind of mapping out the steps that you want to incorporate into your rocket form. It's always a good idea to do that before you go and actually start to use the builder. So what I like to do is I like to come into my notepad inside of my Mac and kind of map out like the questions that I want. So in this case, like what type of service do you want to quote for, responses, where those responses will lead to. So in this case, the two-step would be zip code. So maybe I want to go from the first step to the second step, which is zip code, and then start to map out the rest of how this will look. Then once I have that figured out, I'll jump into Rocket Forms and set the whole thing up. So then another thing to point out is we started this process from a template, and I always suggest doing that. It just makes more sense to start with something that has already been built for you rather than trying to start from scratch. So this tutorial is about coming in and finding a template, making changes, and having it look exactly the way you want it to look without having to build the whole thing from scratch. And then the third thing to point out is just keep in mind that when you're working within the builder, to the left, you're going to be making all of your changes in this section. Most of the changes should reflect in real time here, but it's not to scale. And you'll want to preview the form or even put it on your site and preview it while you're building it. And then to the bottom, you have the step layout section. And as you're building and adding steps and connecting steps to new steps, you'll see them populate in the layout section, and you can click into a step to access it. So if I want to get to the name step, I would just click in here, and then all the name information and fields populated on the left-hand side, and we have the name step here. And the final thing to point out is whenever you're creating a new step inside of your rocket form, you'll need to set an entry step. So what is an entry step? An entry step basically tells the form what step to look for when it loads on your screen. And if an entry step is not set, then the system basically like gets a little confused and it doesn't know what step to start with, so the form won't show. So we often get people who contact us and they say, hey, I can't get the form to work on my site. And I go in and take a look and I find that it's usually just a matter of the entry step not being set. So to set an entry step, just go to the very first step that you want to start out with the form that you want to show when the form loads. So in this case, it's the intro step. Click on it, scroll up to the left-hand corner, and then you'll set it as the entry step. And as you can see, this is already set as the entry step. If I wanted to change the entry step to be the services step, then I would simply come in here, click on services, and then go up to the top left-hand corner, set as entry step. I would click on this button right here. Now what's happening here is the services step is the entry step. And this is noted by the fact that it says entry step here. So this would be the first step of the form. And since the services step does not connect to the intro step, we have the intro step connecting to the services step, but the services step does not point back to the intro step, then this intro step would just be skipped completely. So we're going to set this back to the entry step. So always make sure the entry step is set before you launch the form on your site. Before we talk about making changes and even creating a new step, let's just look at this left-hand column. So this is one example of a step type. Right now, we have three types of steps. We have a question-based step, which tends to look like this, where you just click on something and then choose the response, and then it goes to the next step. There is a form-based step that looks a bit like this. It's a form field. And then there's a text block step, which is usually just reserved for like the thank you step, which is just a text block. Now let's just take a look here. So here is the question step. So the way this is set up is you have your step information, so like the name of the step, every single step has a name. In this case, it's intro question. This isn't the best example. Let's go down to services step. So like I said, every step has a name. So this step is called services step. And if I want to refer to this step, I simply come down here to the services step spot, and you can see that this is the name of the step. If I change this name to new step, definitely not the best name, you'll see that this step is now called new step. So I'm going to change it back to services. So the name is changed back to services. And then you'll see that up here is where you add in the question text and the substep, or the step subtitle. If you don't want a step subtitle, you can just remove it. I'm going to make it say click to choose. I kind of like that text. I have found that to be pretty helpful for people. So then once you get past this section up here, it's just a matter of setting the responses. So the responses section is where all the different responses live. And what you have here is the name of the response and then the step that it points to. So let's take a look at an example. So we have carpet cleaning up at the top, and the carpet cleaning step points to the zip code step. And you can see that the services step is going to zip code. We have curtain cleaning pointing to zip code. And again, services is going to zip code. Now let's say that I wanted to adjust curtain cleaning so it just went to like the contact form, which isn't the most realistic situation, but I want to show you how this can branch into a different direction. So to do that, I clicked on the pencil icon in curtain cleaning. And then I came down here and I can go to select a target step and click on contact form and hit save. So now all of a sudden, if we come back up, you'll see curtain cleaning is now pointing towards contact form. And then if we look at the step layout, we can see that services, if we drag this a bit, is not only going to zip code, but it's also going to contact form. So why might you do something like this? Well, it becomes useful if you're trying to create different branches and set up some conditional logic. So you can essentially have you can take somebody down a whole bunch of different paths based on a selection. One example that comes to mind that we have set up for one customer is for a car dealer. When the form pops up, there's like three choices. It's like find my vehicle, value my trade-in, or something else. I think it's like um, get a appraisal or something like that. I forget. But the point is, in that form, it pops up and there's three choices, and then there's a bunch of branches that it can go down. And the way you set these different branches, or conditional logic, as I like to call it, is you just come into the response and you choose a different target step. So I'm going to change this back now to zip code, just to keep things nice and simple as we continue to go through this tutorial. So it's back to zip code, and then let's just dive a bit more into the responses. So I'm going to open this response up, and let's take a look. So I open the response up, and now to change the response, you simply come down here, and then you have some different things you can change. So there's the response text. So right here it says carpet cleaning. If I wanted this to just say, I don't really know what to call it right now, but I'll just say like deep carpet cleaning. I would type that in and hit save response. Always remember to hit save response here. Like I'm going to circle this, highlight it, star it. Watch that you don't make the mistake of typing in the response and making a bunch of changes and coming up here and hitting save. Some people do that and then they can't figure out why it's not saving. It's so you really just need to make sure that you come down here and hit this save response field. This will ensure that the response is saved. Let me pause this to save some time while I erase all these red marks I just put on the screen. So yeah, so always save the response here, not at the very top. So I made my change. I'm going to hit save response. And as you can see, it now says deep carpet cleaning. I'm going to switch this back so it just says carpet cleaning. Response variable name. So I'm not going to dive too deep on this. We'll have a more advanced tutorial, but this is a way of carrying a response through. So let's say you want to reference the response on another step. um, like zip code, you could just give this response a name like carpet cleaning, and then you can essentially paste this into the zip code step. So it could say something like, oh, get a carpet cleaning quote in, like, what's your zip code for your carpet cleaning quote or something. So you can essentially personalize each step of the form using this variable system. And I wouldn't suggest doing that if you're just starting out. Play with it later when you get more advanced. It's definitely a way of boosting conversions, and it's there for you when you need it. We have a tutorial on how to use this whole thing. So check that out later. We'll talk about it in another. So in terms of setting up the step, that's all you need to do to actually name the step. And then you can come up here and move steps by clicking on the step name and moving it and then dropping it in. And as you can see, vent cleaning just went up. Now, let's say you want to add an icon to your step. To do that, like maybe you want it to look like this. To do that, click on this little graphic, and then that opens up your icon upload section. So we'll have a more advanced tutorial on uploading and design icons for your form in the future. But just real quick, let's say that I want to add an icon of a vacuum into the carpet cleaning response. To do that, come into here and upload the icon into the form. So here's my vacuum, and then you'll see that it has uploaded. Now it looks massive in here. What you want to do is change the height. So I typically go with 20 to 30 pixels. Usually the smaller the better, I find. And right now the height won't be reflected in real time, so we'll have to click save to see that. And let me do that right now. I'll hit save response. And then there it is. It actually looks pretty small. So I'll just come back, and you have to play around with the size a bit. We were updating the carpet cleaning, so I hit the little graphic right there. And actually, it was vent cleaning. So I'll cancel that, and I'll go back to vent cleaning. Clicked on the icon. So let's try 40, see how that looks. So that's better. And I actually don't like that with the border radius looking like that. So here's a quick lesson in design again. We're going to adjust the radius so it's back to not being as round. Let's see here, border radius. I'm just going to set this to 0. There we go. And then back to the icon. So we'll go back to the services step right here. And then here's the icon for vent cleaning that we're trying to adjust. So I'll click that graphic to open it up again, scroll down. And then, so like I said, it's now 40 and it's looking a little better. Maybe 30 will be better. So we'll go with 30. You can adjust the height on mobile and positioning and all that type of stuff. I'm not going to dive too deep into that. And then I'll hit save response. Again, I'll have a deeper dive on this later on the steps. So as you can see now, the icon is added to vent cleaning, and I'm going to add it into the rest of the buttons. And what we'll also probably want to do is adjust the step layout. So I'll show you how to do that in a moment. So I'm going to pause this and just add in the icons to the rest of the buttons. So I'll be back in a second. All right, we're back. And as you can see, I've uploaded all of the icons to the buttons. Now, I've used the same one. It's all the vacuum. So in an ideal world, you would have something that represents curtains, vents, mold, so on and so forth. I'm just trying to save some time here, so I figured I would just use the same one for each button. And as you can see, I set up the last one, which is a vacuum, and the icon height is 30. And I'm not really adjusting too much on mobile right now. You can dive deeper and make changes on mobile, but typically I don't. I just leave it as I upload the graphic in, I use the top position, and I set the height to around 20 to 30, sometimes 40, just depending on how it looks. So then if I hit save response and we go and preview the form, we can see how this looks to scale. So here's how that step looks. Now, one thing we'll probably want to do is to take all of these steps and put them into rows. So we can have like a row of 3 and another row of 3 and another row of 3. And that's really simple to do. To do that, we'll pop back over into the form, go to advanced options and scroll down to step layout. So once you get down to the step layout, enable it or expand it, and then go to response column width. And what you can do here is with each response step, you can adjust the column width, and you can say, all right, I want the steps to appear in a single column. And if that's the case, it will be 12, and that's actually the default styling that we use. But in some cases, you'll probably want steps, or responses, I mean, to be side by side, or to be in 2 columns. So let's say that I want all of these responses up here to be in like 2 or 3 columns. I'll try 4, and you have to play with it a bit. So I'll choose 4, and then in real time, it will update, and that's how it looks now. Now it's not to scale. So what you'll want to do is hit save, and then preview it. So we'll preview it again so we can see it to scale. So then let's see how it looks when I set the response column width to 4. So that's how it looks as 4. So it's looking better. You can at least see all the responses. Let's see if there's another option here. Let's see what 5 looks like. 5 might put it in 2 columns. So here it is as 2 columns. So let's see what it actually looks like in the real-time preview. So 2 columns looks pretty good. Let's just see. 6 columns would definitely be like 2 columns, or 6 would be 2 columns. Let's see what 3 looks like. So like I said, you kind of have to play with it and see what looks or feels the best. So I might go with either 3 or 4 columns. I kind of like the 3 just because it makes the buttons a bit smaller. So I think I'd stick with this. And again, I wouldn't use all vacuums here. But that's looking pretty good. So I'll stick with that. And then again, we'll have a more advanced training on this in the future. So let me refresh the screen. And sometimes you just have to refresh the screen to kind of start things. There's so much happening here in the background. And again, this isn't to scale, so always remember, don't go crazy when you see the text that's kind of floating onto the background. You just need to look in the preview section. So that's the response section. That's how you update a response, change the target step, and add an icon to a response. One more thing to cover in responses is you have some additional things you can do. So a couple things to point out is you can enable multi-select. So if you, by default, this step is a single select step. So if I just click on these, it just advances to the next step. Well, what happens if you want somebody to choose more than one of these? Well, you just come in here, turn on multi-select, and add a next button label. Save. And then this will switch up the form so somebody can choose multiple choices. So if I choose curtain cleaning, you see that the next button just popped up. And there's actually some borders that should show up when this is selected. That would be set in the design section. So let me just show you so you can see what I'm talking about. So with multi-select, you definitely want to have like a border show up so they know that they selected the step. So to do that, you go to design and then go down to multi-select styling. And then we'll just set the selected border color to, let's go with like a bright blue for now. And then we'll keep the text color as white. And now watch what happens when we select an option. So do you see how that turned blue? So you can play with the colors, and then when you hit next, it will go to the next step. I typically don't use multi-select styling. I tend not to build forms where they have a lot of choices. But if you have that situation, then feel free to use it. It's a pretty great feature. And then I'm just going to turn that. I'm going to go back to steps now. So let's go back to our services step. So there's some more things that you can do within the step section, and we'll cover most of these within the lead delivery tutorial video. So that is the response section. Let's take a look at the form. So when it comes to the form, we'll take a look at the contact form. The form starts the same way. So you have the step name. So in this case, it's contact form, and that's reflected right here. And then you have the form title, which is essentially like the question or the request. In this case, it's please complete the form to get your quote, the step subtitle, and then the button. Now, with the form, you can select a target step. So since this is the contact form, the target step is the final step in the form. In this case, the thank you message. If I wanted the final step to be like name for some reason, which wouldn't make sense, then I would choose name and hit save. But in this case, we want the form to end with the thank you message. And that's why it's set as the target step. So something to point out here as well is when you're ending your form. So let's say that you have a contact form like this on the last step. To completely like bring the form to close that loop, you'll need to set a thank you step message. So you'll just need to have a thank you step set on your form. And this is the last step of the form. So going back to the contact form, we covered the step name, the form title, the subtitle. You'll need to add in a button label. So I like to add in a label like this, or typically I'll say like, if we're talking about a form step like zip code, then I'll just say next or continue like this. And then in this case, in the zip code step, the target step is name. And you can see that because it's going from zip code to name. So then there's form fields. And just like the responses, all the form fields are in this section. So if I wanted to add a form field, I would click on the add form field button. And then this opens up all the different things you can do to add a form field. So let's say that I wanted to add in a field called city. So I'll name the field city. And then I'll make the field name city like that. And then it won't actually show up until you hit save. So the field label city, and the label is what shows up in the middle of the field. Like this field label is zip code, as you can see. So when the field shows up for city, it's going to show up here, and then it will say city. And then field type. So there's a few different types of fields. We have a text field, a select field, which is like a drop down, a slider, and some more advanced fields, which I won't cover right now. For this case, we're just going to make it a text field. Now, there's also there's field validation. So we have validation on the full name, phone number, email address, zip code, UK postal code, and we're adding in some more validation as I speak. In this case, I'm just going to keep it set to text. And then we have some more fields that we'll cover in the lead delivery section. So all I have to do is click Save Form Field. Again, do not try to save the form field up here. You'll need to save it down here. So I'll hit Save Form Field. And as you can see, the form field city is now below postal code in the form field section. And here it is right here. So then let's look at real quick the postal code field. So this looks the same way as city, except the validation is set to zip code. So if you try to type in more than the actual 5-digit zip code in the US, then like if I try to make it 6 digits, then it's not going to work. So there's validation on that. Now, if I want to delete a step, or if I want to delete a field, I would just simply come in here and hit the delete button. So I'm going to delete city. And now that field is gone. And then just a couple more things to point out. You can add in a checkbox. So to do that, I would say like, I agree to receive marketing material. So let's take a look at how this looks. So I added in the checkbox, and you'll see it's right up here. And here's the box that you can have them submit before they continue to the next step. You can also mark this field as required. So if I want this to be required, I can force it so that way they have to make it required. You can add in additional text below the submit button. It doesn't need to be a checkbox. Before we move on to the next step, let's talk about redirecting somebody to a thank you page or somewhere deeper in your funnel. So by default, Rocket Forms will redirect somebody to the last step of your form. In this case, you're probably going to make it a thank you step that looks something like this. So let's say you want to redirect someone to a custom thank you page, or like I said, deeper into your funnel. You would just set the redirect link on the step before the thank you step. So in this case, we would go to the contact form, and then we would drop the redirect link somewhere in here. So it would be something like https://yourdomain.com/ like thank you or something like that. And then when they go through, when the lead goes through and they submit the form, they'll hit this thank you message for like a brief second just to capture the data in the system, and then they'll be redirected to your custom thank you page or deeper into your funnel. So that is how you set a redirect. So now let's go into adding a step. We are going to add in a step response type called, let's see, so we have, let's make the step response when. So we're going to pre-qualify the lead based on when they actually need the service. So to add in a step, go all the way down to the bottom and click on new step. And this opens up a blank step. And if you look at the left-hand side, you'll see that it says create up here. So when it comes to creating a step, you need to choose a step type. So like I've kind of mentioned before, there's 3 different step types. You have a question step, which is like the one where it's the response is going down. You have a form step, which looks like this. You're trying to get some piece of contact information. Then you have a text block, and this is usually reserved for the thank you step. So if you're looking to create that final step in the form, you'll want to use a text block. Now with the text block, one additional thing to point out is you can embed custom code into this. So to do that, just enable the custom code switch, and then you can add in your own code. You can drop in a Calendly widget in here, a video. There's a lot you can do here. I would play with that and see what's possible. But if you don't want to do that, you can add in your own default text. So going back to the creation of a step, we are going to add in a step called when. So we're going to add in a question step, and let's call the step when. And then the question itself will be, when do you need the service? The step subtitle, I'm not going to add a step subtitle. Well, I guess I will for this example. I'll just say click to, no, I'm going to make this the last step before so we have the form going here. So I'm going to add the step right before the contact form. So we'll just say almost there. So this step is not saved. And as you can see, to start to add the responses in, we need to save the step first. So I'm going to come up here and hit save step. So the step is saved. And we know this because if we look at the step layout, you'll see this when step just kind of like off by itself, just kind of here. So what we need to do is bring this step in and connect it to the form. And we'll do that in a minute. First, let's create the responses. So to create the responses, you simply go to add response, and then we'll add in 3 responses. So the 3 responses will be, the first one will be as soon as possible. And we are going to point this step at the contact form. So the target step will be contact form. And then I'll hit save response. And a couple things just happened. So first, the as soon as possible step is right here. It now saved into the form. And second, this when step is now connected to the contact form. So we have the step connected and it's all part of the flow. So we have to finish the responses. Before we do that, let's connect the describe step to the when step to make it all flow. So we'll go back to describe. We're at the describe step now, and we're going to connect it to when. So I selected the target step as when. I'm going to come up here and hit save. And now if we look at the flow, you'll see that it's going from name to describe to when. So it's flowing perfectly through, and when is connected into the flow. And now all we have to do is add the rest of the responses. Now, before we do that, let's say we wanted the services step Oh, you can hear my dogs barking. I think my baby just woke up. I've been doing this since like 5 a.m. and he's been sleeping in. He's pretty lucky. I'm going to pause this and let my dogs continue freaking out for a moment. Sorry about that. So I'm back. My son just woke up. My dogs got all their barking done. Sometimes when he wakes up, they go crazy and they bark like crazy, and it's just so loud. So I had to pause it. Today's actually Halloween in the U.S. and he's a little fox this year, so we're gonna have to get ready to take him trick or treating. This is his costume. That's my son dressed up as a fox. But he's more like a bull in a china shop. He just kind of runs through the house and knocks things down. So anyway, back to the form. So where were we? Oh, so let's say that we wanted to connect a different step to the when step. So like services. So to do that, we would just come back in and we would have to change each of these options and connect it to the when step. So if we wanted services to go to when, then it's just a matter of changing carpet cleaning, the target step in carpet cleaning to say when, the target step in vent cleaning. Click there and open it up to say when. I'm not going to do that because I like this flow where when is coming before the contact form. So let's finish by adding in the rest of the responses into the when step. So I clicked on when. Now I'm going to add in, so I have as soon as possible. We'll say like 1 to 2 weeks. We'll connect this to the contact form. And then we'll say, I'm not sure. We'll say just shopping around. So this is why I also suggest to kind of plan out the steps and responses ahead of time, because it's easier to kind of think when you're like sitting down and brainstorming in a Word document. Um, this probably isn't the best response. So like if I were to actually sit down and think about this, I'd come up with something way better. But I'm doing this off the cuff. So, oops. You can't have a step go back to itself. So that's something that is important to point out. I just made that mistake. So that should actually go to the contact step. So now we have our 3 steps. And if I wanted just shopping around to be at the very top for some reason, I could just move it up to the top, but I'll put it back to the bottom. So that is pretty much everything that we need to cover as far as adding in a new step. Let me just save this, and then let's preview how the form looks so far. So this particular form is set to be embedded and pop-up, just so we can see how it looks in the preview. So is the service for your home or business? We've already updated the design in a previous video, so go back and watch that if you haven't. We'll say business. And then what type of service do you want to quote for? And again, I used vacuums as all the graphics here. I would probably then go back and change these out. So we'll just say curtain cleaning. And this is set to multi-select. Typically, I won't use this, but we'll just go with it. So I'll just hit next. What is your zip code? So we're auto-filling the zip code, so this already populated. Full name, my name. And for field validation, so you can break these fields up, I've actually started to include the full name into the contact step just to reduce the number of steps. So yeah, so there's something that I don't like. So I actually don't like how this is going from name to describe to contact form. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete this name step and I'm going to add name into the contact form. So this will reduce the number of steps in the form. Multi-step forms are great, but you definitely don't want to like add in more steps just for the sake of having steps. That's one thing I learned. And then what I have found is it doesn't really make sense to have name as its own step. It makes more sense just to stick that on the contact form step. So this is a good opportunity to show you too, like how to kind of go into the middle of the form, adjust things and kind of move things around. So I clicked on the name step to open it up. And then what I'm going to do here is just delete the step out. So to do that, I'll go up to the upper right-hand corner, hit the delete button, and just verify, make sure you want to do this before you delete a step, because once you delete a step, you cannot get it back. And same thing for a form. If you accidentally delete a form, then you cannot retrieve that form. And luckily, we make it hard. The only way to delete your form is to come up to these 3 little dots and click delete. So it's kind of like hard to find. So that's done on purpose. But let's delete this form now because we're going to move the name onto the contact form step. So yes, I want to delete that. And now that I did that, you'll see that the form just broke up. So this is a problem if we were to put this on the site, because what would happen is someone would go to this first step and they would go through the zip code, submit it, and then the form would just like stop working and you would get a lead notification with no contact details. So we're going to need to connect the zip code step now to describe since we removed that name step. So to do that, right now we're on just like a random step that doesn't exist, like a placeholder. Click in the zip code. So we clicked in the zip code, it loaded up on the screen, and then go to the left-hand side, go to target step, and then choose describe. So then when you hit save up here, you'll actually see the step layout connect now. So now it goes from services to zip code to describe. The whole thing's connected. So now we'll add the name to the contact form. So to do that, I'll go to the contact form, and we just need to get the name field in here. So the contact form is already set up. It's connected to the thank you step. So let's just go to the left-hand side and go down to form fields and click on add form field. So for the form name, I'm just going to call this name, and then the field label. So you have a choice when it comes to name. You can either get the first name as a field and the last name as a field, or you can get the first and last name in the same field. I'm going to go with just the full name, so I'll call this full name. And then the field type is just text. Now for validation, since we have full name turned on, we actually have a validation type, which is full name. And this kind of forces someone to make a space in attempt to get them to leave their full name. If you're just collecting the first name on its own step and the last name on its own step, then you will not use the full name validation. Only use this if you're trying to get first and last name. And then I'll hit save step. And it looks like the full name has been added to the form, to the very top. You would probably just want to play around with the layout of these fields, maybe have phone number last. But altogether, I like the direction of this form, so let's preview it. Close down these previews first. So I'll say I'm a business. I'm looking for carpet cleaning. My zip code's auto-filled, so I'll just hit next. My carpets. So I just said my carpets are really dirty and I need someone to clean once per week. Didn't really think this one through. And then when do you need the service? We'll just say as soon as possible. And then as you can see, the name now is part of the form step. And again, these fields, the phone number probably needs to be moved to the bottom of the form. And then if I were to submit the form and get my quote, then it would either hit that thank you step or redirect if I set a redirect link, which I think I did in the form. So I think at this point, that is it for the step setup. It seems like there's a lot here, but it's really not that much. And once you get this down once you play with this, it will become so simple for you to kind of get in here and modify steps and set steps up. It just takes getting in and playing with the tool for like 10 to 15 minutes. And I mean, if you think about it, it's really not that bad. Like there's a lot of like website builders out there that are super complicated and you need to get in there and take a lot of time playing with it. Or like when you think of PPC, like paid search on Google, that is pretty complex and takes a lot of time learning it. This isn't too bad. Just get in here, play with it, start out with a template, play with it for 20, 30 minutes, and you'll get the hang of it pretty fast. And then once you get a form that you really like and that's working for you, and if you need to use it for different clients or websites or pages, just come up here and hit the clone button like this. Watch how simple this is. I just, like, let's say I have this form down. I love the way it looks. I'll hit clone. And then just like that, I have a new form. It pulls out all the lead delivery and add the site information so it doesn't kind of mix things up. And then you have your form set up. You can make modifications, put in new lead delivery information and new add to site information, which we'll talk about in a future video. And that's all there is to it. So at this point, we've covered settings, design, steps. The next two things to talk about are lead delivery. So telling rocket forms where to send your leads. And this is pretty simple. A lot of people rely on Zapier. It's a huge one. And adding the rocket form to your website. And that's pretty simple too. We'll get that video up soon if it's not up by the time you watch this. You can also see how to add the rocket form to your site in the 7-minute get started video. So check that out. So I am now going to go and celebrate Halloween with my son, and I hope you have a great day. If you have problems or need any help with the step setup, just come down here and use the chat message. I will help you out. I love helping people, so feel free to use that message. Don't feel like you're a bother. I don't mind at all. And if you need help, yeah, just let me know and have a great day. Thank you.